On Friday, October 14th, Collins submitted a formula containing proposals for continued IRA drilling and the functioning of training camps and Republican courts. He essentially undertook to ensure that no provocative displays would occur and that the court system would not be expanded during the truce. The British delegation found his proposals acceptable, and the possibility of the conference collapsing due to breaches of the truce seemed to wane. The remainder of the day was spent discussing Northern Ireland. The Irish tried to persuade the British that Dublin could settle its own strife with Belfast if London would cease backing the latter. They asked why it was fair to partition 6 counties on the basis of an overall unionist population, but not fair to allow Fermanagh and Tyrone join with the southern states on the basis of their nationalist majorities. Griffith stated that Dublin would be willing to grant some powers to a Belfast Parliament, but that any such Parliament should remain subordinate to Dublin. The exchange appears to have become somewhat heated when the British claimed that they had not created the Ulster problem, and would be delighted if Ulster would join with the rest of Ireland. Collins reminded them that it was they who had partitioned Ireland. He also stated that southern forces could easily defeat Ulster, and that the only thing that prevented them from doing so was the immorality of such an approach. It was a peculiar intervention in the midst of a peace conference and was met by a British reminder of the fragility of their coalition and consequential political limitations of their flexibility in reaching compromise. In the midst of this day, Collins received 2 letters from Kiernan. The first seems to have been written after she had received his opinions on Boland's transatlantic courtship. Kiernan left Collins in no doubt that she had made her choice, but found it difficult to communicate this to Boland.
My very dear Michael, I had closed my letter to you yesterday before yours arrived. Your first from London. Post only gets here at 1 o'clock. You can just picture my delight to know that you got there safely and feeling in good form. Went to Mass and Holy Communion again this morning, if you know what that means for lazy Kitty, to thank God you were safe and well. Yesterday's letter didn't exactly displease me. It was full of little questions. I know how you feel about the Harry business. That is why I mention it so early in this note. It is wise what you say about Harry, etc. I haven't written yet. I don't know exactly what to say. I wish you were here. It would be so much easier to discuss it. It was obvious without my saying a word to him. The conditions weren't the same with our agreement. I told Harry I didn't love him, and he was prepared to risk it with the idea that I might grow to love him. And I think I told you all the other little things before. It would take so long to tell you now, and I want to tell you other things. Please forgive me, dear, for not being more satisfactory, but you can be happy to know that you are out of it and will not be blamed in the slightest. It was all my fault. I think it better not to discuss it further just now, but you can if you feel like it. I don't. You were just a dear to write again yesterday. If you knew how much I appreciate it, it makes me love you all the more. I was delighted with the letter today, but of course it made me long, as I am always longing, to be wherever you are. When leaving town, I was convinced I wouldn't go to London. Nothing would persuade me. Just the way I felt from the beginning about my love for you, convinced I wouldn't give in, wouldn't see you, etc. Felt myself wondering when I'd see you. Every hour seemed a day with the result, and now I'm always thinking of you and wondering if I could possibly do without you. Of course, if you were to feel different, it would make a difference, so don't worry. If you are convinced absolutely and think you won't change, be very sure I'm all right. It all depends on you. Are you? Excuse all this, but I just let myself go. The agreement that we be absolutely frank is good and should keep all misunderstanding away. I don't express myself well. Don't wait to think. So excuse. I send you a kiss. A hug, a nice one, just for friendship. That, I hope, will never end between us. I want to be your pal and everything. I know you'll laugh at this, but most of all, I do want you to love me, extraordinarily. It should come easy to you being an extraordinary person. If you don't feel you could, then just tell me sometime soon. It isn't necessary to answer all my questions immediately. There will be an important later, Michael. But I'm just saying what's on my mind, and I hope it pleases you. When I began this, I felt I could write you a stiff letter. I mean just ordinary. But I let myself go and said I'll write what I feel. I got your wire this morning. It made me just miserable that you didn't get my letter yet. My mistake not to have written Monday. Never mind, my own love. I'll try and make up for it by a few little surprises, and indeed you know that I'll wire now several times in the day, if I thought it was wise, but your address is uncertain for my wiring, you understand. But this time I hope you've got my first letter, and that you don't mind my foolishness, as I realise now to write it, but you're too big to mind that, and you will forgive me. About Paul, Helen and London, I'll not say anything yet, that you won't be disappointed, as it's very uncertain about my getting there. I'd love it to be with you, but I'd want you all the time, and then I know the temptation, especially as we are so keen on each other, and I'm not strong-willed enough. It would be too big an effort for me, I'm afraid. At least I'd rather not bet about it. How I'd love to just be a little bit stronger. It would have saved a lot in your episode, but we agreed to forget it, and I have, strange to say. The papers were most interesting, especially here one has time to read every line, so if it's convenient and you have any more, send them along. Got this letter from Crown today, isn't it funny? I think you are an old friend he refers to. Give my love to Hyde, etc. We had a card from Mrs. Duggan today, and I must admit it made me envious, wishing I was in her place. She said she saw you in great form. I wonder what sort of form you're in now after L. George. Now it's posting time, and of course I want you to get this as soon as possible. Wish we had more posts out. So bye-bye, my very dear love. My love to you, your own little pet Kit. Write soon. I'm very lonely tonight, and would give anything to see you.
Her second letter was probably written a day later, and contained details of her life in Granard. It also assured Collins that she was following his progress via the newspapers. Her continuing insecurities may have been revealed when she noted,
In the sketch, there are lovely pictures of pretty girl secretaries. No doubt you will have a word with them.
In London, Collins wrote of his happiness at Kiernan's effectively confirming her commitment to him. He invited her to London and hoped that she would come for a few days, even if he couldn't give her much attention. On that same night, Kiernan was putting pen to paper in Granard. Her insecurities seemed to have overtaken her again, and she now repeated her questioning of Colin's willingness to commit to her. She questioned whether she would still be attractive to him as they grew older, and informed him that she would be willing to part if he felt that such might be the case.
My very dear Michael, first of all, you will have to excuse the cheap-looking notepaper, but the other is really too small. I'm all alone now. Maud and Vi have just motored away to the Mullingar dance. Needless to say, I feel lonely and wish you were near. I hadn't the energy to get ready to go, so suppose I could not complain, so it's my own fault. I will always pay the penalty, and my late nights in Gresham have the effect afterwards of making me feel depressed and indifferent. Later on, when I sleep more, I'll probably feel all right and will be anxious to fly about the same as I always did. But is it fair to be boring you with all how I feel? Why can't I write a cheery letter? I had a long sleep this morning. It was my morning off, so I stayed in bed, slight touch of neuralgia, and only got up at 12 o'clock. So it was a rush from that until now. I scribbled you a line in our business quarters. I was very pleased today when I got your letter, and as I was afraid I might annoy you, and I fancied you would have my letter by Thursday anyway. I appreciate you writing every day without effort. Was glad you didn't misunderstand my first letter. Yes, what you say is right, to be straight and understanding. Of course, I love to hear that you're always thinking of me. I think of you so often that I'd rather not tell you. Sometimes I'm very happy and say love is everything. Then again, I feel very sad and it keeps coming into my head, wondering, how long will it last with you? Do be candid with yourself and then me. Will you promise to love me always the same? Of course, it's really not fair writing those things in a letter. So much easier to talk them. If you think you might not, then I for one would agree to part and think of you always in a lovely way. But I have a kind of selfish, foolish idea that in 20 years' time, DV, I'd expect the same attentions, that if away from me you would feel like writing every day, that you wouldn't have got tired of me and that sort of thing. Now, it is quite possible that you may feel different. Girls get older so much quicker, Gresham pace, than men. Fellows keep young too long, girls get old too quickly. Not me. I realise it's a foolish idea for a young girl to get into her head, But I can't help it, and I do know that everything depends on the man once a girl gets married. If he doesn't feel all right, begin with a splendid foundation for his love, then it's all up. That's why I even entertained the idea that I could ever possibly marry H, and he knows this too. I may be wrong, but I think he is capable of deeper affection for me than most men. But he also knows that I don't love him. It's no effort for him to be a great lover, and of course he gets no thanks. This is a very personal letter, and I hope you will forgive me and understand. I am selfish, and unselfish in ways than other girls wouldn't be. I am selfish for my own happiness and peace of mind. People tell me that I have no deep feelings, but if it's possible for me to have them, I have them for you. I've given you what I've never given any other man. Indeed, it's not much, I suppose, but you have it anyway. I don't wish this letter to make you unhappy. I've always wanted to make you feel happy. Otherwise, I would have kept away from you, knowing the danger. Only I had great desire to make you feel happy, and it was always a fight. I mean in the ordinary way, as to whether I could just switch off and not allow myself to love you deeply, or just give in to my feelings and yours. So there you are, and you have it all now, and your dear knows it is a silly letter, and not a bit necessary to write half of it. Dear, dear sweetheart, it's getting quite late, and with this splendid opportunity of quietness, could you tell how I wish you were near, but you know it. About Helen and London. I had a letter from Helen this morning to say you asked her to write. She says they can only be a night in London on their way back. From what you know of Kitty, you can guess I'd love London and everything, especially under those circumstances, but Mops is making a fuss and I hate rows. Helen's letter to Maud was full of London, how she and P love London, her wonderful coat, Paul's greatness to her, endless clothes and so on, what H loves. She seems indeed happy. Paul is just her style. I believe he's got an opera hat. Do you wear my bow tie, by the way, with your dinner jacket? I'd love to see you rigged thus. I can picture how well you would look. Well, to come back to the point, it would be just splendid for me to be there with them, but Mops wants to meet Helen in Dublin on her way back, so I'm afraid I cannot go. Perhaps with some luck later, if it suits you, I might get there. How I'd love it. But just Kitty's bad luck now, while they're there, it would be just the thing. Then I'd have to get something new. So in any case, it would be a rush, and when I feel in better form, I'll be more lively and interesting to you. You would be disappointed if I wanted to go to bed early, etc. And I know only too well that I want you always near me, and the same old story over again. If we hadn't this, then we would believe we weren't enjoying ourselves at all. What would you say? Perhaps I'm wrong. Let us hope so. I'm getting quite sleepy, so I'll say good night. I'll continue to pray for you, and you for me. Wish you heard remarks here. M has put some religion into you. Funny, isn't it, really? Shall write tomorrow. This will be the 11 o'clock post in the morning. Bye-bye. Yours with love, Kit. P.S. Tomorrow's letter will be quite a different style from this, I hope. I'm just feeling lonely tonight. Feel like everyone has forgotten me. Childish idea. Know very well if you were here I wouldn't be feeling like this. But it's just passing, and I know you won't mind. If you feel in bad humour, write it to me. If you were here now, I know you would get a great big hug, just the sort one little Lil gives me. Answer some of my questions quite straight in the next letter. Be sure to do so. Then I can tell you other things. But do be straight with yourself first of all. If, of course, you were determined always to like me, things would, I'm sure, work out as you say. Well, with two people just equally in love. I don't want to think about it if it wasn't going to be lifelong. Love and love again. Tell the truth to Kit.
The weekend wore on, and Collins continued his work. He did not receive the letter in which Kiernan had questioned their future. Yet on his 31st birthday, he too seemed reflective, and penned one of his longer letters. In it, he urged Kiernan to be as forthright as possible when explaining her feelings.
Today is my birthday. Only one who remembered it was my sister, the nun. She sent me the enclosed and I send it to you with every wish she has for me. Kit, dear, following on last night's note, I am now acknowledging your letter written on Thursday at 1:30. It is afternoon, a lovely day, bells ringing for church and chapel, sunshine on my left, typewriters clacking on my right. I've kept the lovely secretaries in working, and it's a shame for me, but alas, I have to do it. Curious thing, I've just come in from meeting a man named Collins. He says his father came from Granard. I knew some Collinses must have been there before, and how I wish I were there now, on the moat. Last time I was on that moat early morning. Do you remember? I looked across the Inny to Derryvara, over Kinally and Shilleen, and thought of Fergus O'Farrell. To Mount Nugent, and turning westward saw Cairn Hill, where the beacons were lighted to announce to the men of Longford that the French had landed in Killala. Queer I run off like this, especially when you're not interested in these things. Was at 2 masses today. One my usual at the oratory at 8 o'clock, the other an official one at Maiden Lane. Even at the official one I managed to come back and light a candle for you. Second one there for today. Dr. McCrory celebrated the Mass and we paid our respects to him afterwards. We were photographed, and if you ever see the photograph you'll see your second tie. Now as to your own letter. One thing I was glad to hear, and that was the light comfort you got through my not believing you hadn't written. Well, wasn't I right? I'd even thought of the tired Sunday and the worked Monday, so even through my disappointment I had my explanation. H&P looked fine. There is no mistake there, I'm happy to say. Isn't that good? I feel exactly like you about it. The aftermath. That's the first test. Every test passed is another milestone on the way to lifelong happiness. My sister liked them both very much indeed. She didn't know that Helen was the girl I mentioned to her once, and she didn't know that you were her sister. She'll like you. Don't worry about that. Yes, it was a lovely party, but I was unpleasant. As I have really too many things to carry out at the present moment, it is not right for me to inflict myself on people. Please always say to me what you think, not what I'd like you to think. That's the only way to get a proper understanding, and if I don't like what you say, then it's my lookout. You realise what I mean, don't you, Kit? And I hope you'll see a close link when you look at the real photograph and see the more vivid stripes. It must have been nice for you to see the children doing yourself. Tell me more about it. Were they doing you in love or in... But no, they could only love you. I hope some of them thought of me. You'll have seen all the praise and flattery that has been showered on me since I came here and have been publicly known. You will know, I hope, that they leave me untouched just as their dispraise and their blame did. All the same to me. That upper lip of mine has been called on to do much scornful upturning since I've seen you. God bless and protect you. Dear, dear Kit. Please excuse the frightful length of these things.
Collins would return to negotiations the following day. Back in Granard, Kiernan went for a drive with her sister and brother-in-law. She later recorded that she thought of Collins most of the time. Curiously, she does not appear to have remembered that it was his birthday.